A student retreat held by the University of Mississippi last weekend was cut short due to the discovery of a racist banana peel. According to the Daily Mississippian, leaders of the university's Greek life convened at a local campground for a 3-day get-together to promote unity and leadership. All was going well until Ryan Swanson decided to ruin the party by eating a banana. He reports he couldn't find a trash can and, without a proper garbage receptacle in sight, threw the banana peel into the trees and just went about his day. Michaela McNeil, president of the historically black sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha, spotted the banana peel hanging from a tree and felt, quote, just sort of paranoid for a second and decided it was a racially motivated threat. She called the experience strange and surreal and shared this with other camp leaders, inspiring an entire day of race-related discussion, which ironically started with a breakfast that included bananas. Regularly scheduled events were shafted in order to create a safe space to discuss the banana peel, which has been officially branded as an incident. McNeil complained to the student newspaper that the discussion was too transparent, which caused students to feel unwelcome and leave in tears. Swanson was accused of deliberately perpetuating racial violence, and when students were confused by this, they were told to Google an American University incident from earlier this year in which bananas were found hanging from campus trees the morning that a black student president was to be sworn in. References to Alpha Kappa Alpha and Harambe were written on those bananas. Someone decided the strings were meant to represent nooses, and it was labeled a hate crime worthy of an FBI investigation. The similarities between the events were so intentional that the students had to be told to Google it. When Swanson apologized and told the harrowing tale of his mistake, he was told to be more conscious of how his thoughtless actions affect people of color. Enough students felt traumatized by Saturday night that the rest of the event was canceled. The university reports they plan to work closely with diversity staff to help students process the event. Big Media has decided to leave the land of make-believe this week and has finally decided that Antifa is a group of violent, entitled thugs. Surprise! Berkeley's mayor led this new enlightenment by calling on authorities to classify Antifa as a gang after yet another weekend of violence. This time, the violence surrounded a No Marxism in America rally that was canceled, but Antifa decided to show up and crack some skulls anyway. You go, comrade! The rally's Facebook page described the event as a stand against communism, denounced racism and supremacy, and welcomed, quote, people of all races, genders, and sexualities. And in a dramatic twist, organizer Amber Cummings revealed herself as a trans woman. Despite this, Mayor Jesse Arreguín insisted it was an alt-right white supremacist rally. He encouraged people to instead attend counter-protests held by groups like Unite for Freedom from right-wing violence. Say that one 10 times fast. This is the same Mayor Jesse Arreguín, by the way, who is a Facebook member of By Any Means Necessary, a militant activism group that supports Antifa and Antifa tactics. By Any Means Necessary, of course, immediately created a Facebook event calling on supporters to, quote, shut down the alt-right and fascist recruitment rally. The event claimed that the rally was being held specifically to target, assault, and murder blacks, Hispanics, Muslims, and the LGBTQ community. To be clear, they told their community that a middle-aged trans woman who had formerly denounced the KKK, white supremacy, and Nazis was holding a rally to kill black and gay people. Let that just percolate for a minute. Needless to say, the city denied Cummings her permit based on a technicality and fears of violence. This was widely spread across several news outlets, but Antifa claimed it was all a big media ploy to recruit more fascists. There was only one problem. Antifa showed up on Sunday and found roughly 24 Trump supporters, including this hardcore Mexican-born Nazi. Scenes from the event included a father and his teenage son being attacked with feet, fists, and shields that ironically read, "No hate."
Get away, you fucking out! What are you guys beating yourself for? This pepper spray! We have the pepper spray!
Then there was this man who was gifted with bruised ribs and kidneys before someone covered him to protect him. And of course, there was this scene that made its way around social media. Etc., 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 ad nauseum. Those shields and clubs in the videos, by the way, were supposed to be banned from the area, but over 100 Antifa pushed through police lines and avoided security checks. As usual, police were ordered to stand down. Berkeley Police Chief Andrew Greenwood characterized the day as a fight over a grass patch and said there was no need for a confrontation. Meanwhile, police had to fake arrest Patriot Prayer organizer Joey Gibson in order to rescue him. But no confrontation, please. 13 people were arrested and 2 of Antifa's victims had to be hospitalized. And now suddenly, without a single Nazi in sight, there was no one else to blame the violence on. The Washington Post ran the headline, "Black-clad Antifa members attack peaceful right-wing demonstrators in Berkeley." Now that is a phrase we haven't heard in some time. MSNBC's Morning Joe condemned Antifa, as did Slate, sort of, and local CBS 5, ABC, and the Associated Press all called out Antifa's violence. An LA Times reporter on scene marveled that Antifa and anti-supremacist demonstrators were accusing people of being Nazis at random. Even Nancy Pelosi made an official statement, as though none of them had spent the last several months promoting, justifying, or excusing Antifa's bad behavior. Now, suddenly, come the news articles that the FBI has been warning local officials about Antifa's violence. Suddenly, the Washington Post runs an article stating that Antifa are the moral equivalent of neo-Nazis and are, quote, violent advocates of murderous ideology. Now, Politico reveals that Homeland Security have classified Antifa activity as domestic terrorist violence and were issuing warnings long before Charlottesville, long before the Milo riot, and long before the inauguration. In fact, Antifa were labeled as terroristic extremists by the government as far back as April of 2016, and yet somehow no one in the media has reported it until now. But all hope is not lost. While Antifa was duking it out against randos in Berkeley, Hurricane Harvey broke U.S. records as it made landfall 3 separate times, dumping nearly 52 inches of rain on Houston. Gas pipelines are down, and any area gas stations are expected to be empty before Labor Day. A flooded chemical plant erupted into flames, and municipal water systems are down. Reservoirs had to be emptied, further flooding surrounding areas in order to prevent dams from breaking. Conditions were so bad at some shelters that evacuees had to then be evacuated from the shelters housing them, with government officials saying they were unable to help. Over 1 million people had to be evacuated, 200,000 homes were destroyed, and 10,000 people were reportedly rescued by FEMA. But long before the government showed up to help, the Cajun Navy were en route with canoes, duck boats, and airboats coordinating rescue efforts through various social media platforms and rescuing thousands from the floodwaters. Even after formal rescue efforts began, first responders often had to turn to the Navy for help. According to the Washington Post, Cajun Navy volunteers outnumbered government rescuers by the hundreds. They rescued entire families, pets, and even the elderly trapped in flooding nursing homes. The New Yorker called the group spontaneous and self-organizing and pointed out that the group was able to come through where flawed government programs and regulations could not. The Washington Post, too, ran a piece about the Cajun Navy and how their use of social media and walkie-talkie app Zello were able to fill, quote, the humanitarian holes that local government is unable to plug. The Post admitted that often government help is slow and not forthcoming, making private, unregulated citizen groups essential. The informal group started in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, but really took root after another round of historic flooding in Louisiana last year. Legislators in the area have tried to regulate the group in the past, attempting to require rescuers to obtain special permits, training, and mandating membership fees. Luckily, those regulation efforts failed, and over 1,500 volunteers and roughly 800 private boats descended on Houston over the past week. The footage of these efforts is seriously the most amazing thing I have ever seen.
You guys just jumping in to help out? Yes, sir. Yeah? Where are you coming from?
Texas City.
Texas City? What are you going to do?
I'm going to try to save some lives.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, sir? We're gonna try and pick him up. All right. All right. Good girl. That is so awesome.
Unfortunately, leading up to the storm, residents received mixed messages, with the governor telling families to evacuate and Houston's mayor, fearing traffic gridlock, told residents to shelter in place. But because of the Cajun Navy, the storm claimed only 40 lives despite the record-breaking devastation. Other citizens have also put out tremendous relief efforts. Sports ball player J.J. Watt started an online fundraiser that has raised over $15 million. An owner of a furniture chain called Gallery Furniture opened its doors to displaced residents and is now housing about 400 people between two locations. A local doctor made his way through the floodwaters in a canoe in order to give medical help at a nearby hospital. A group of neighbors was seen forming a human chain outside of an apartment complex to help save a woman who was trapped in the water and going into labor. They gathered a crew via email when 911 didn't respond. Meanwhile, social justice warriors over on Twitter laughed at the disaster, saying Texans deserved it for being Christian and conservative. Others criticized Melania Trump for boarding a plane in stilettos because focusing on footwear is what's important. Still more used it as an opportunity to complain about the patriarchy and white male rednecks. But at least they're consistent. That concludes your Liberty-related news for the week. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or give me a follow at any of the plethora of social media accounts listed below. And if you really like my videos and want to help support my channel, you can support me over on Patreon or with a one-time donation through PayPal. Until next week, thanks for watching and helping me to spread the message of liberty.